Welcome to Book by Book for February 16, 2022. We're going to be looking at Joshua chapters 5 through 8. And so this is going to be kind of an action-packed couple of events in these 4 chapters. There's some significant things. When we look at Joshua, there's a lot of focus on the conflict and the holy war aspect of all of it, but that's really just through the first 12 chapters of Joshua. And so we're hitting all of the major action pretty early, and then we'll get into the allotment of land and then the final recommitment of the people of Israel to the choose this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And so here we last week they crossed the Jordan, and they are getting ready to enter into the work that God has called them to. And so this week, what we're going to see, the recommitment of covenant and celebration of Passover, circumcision. We're going to see them go up to Jericho and do the Jericho March, story that we're probably fairly familiar with. We will also then look at the next battle to Ai and the failure there, and then why did they fail? And so then we'll see God's discipline on Achan, and there's a lot of great important things that are happening in these 4 verses. And so let's just pick up in Joshua 5:1. Now, when all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan and all the Canaanite kings along the coast heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan before the Israelites, until they had crossed over, their hearts melted in fear, and they no longer had the courage to face the Israelites. And so the news is spreading, that the Lord is doing this work for the people of Israel and the Canaanites. This phrase, their hearts melted in fear, is significant. Like where they felt strong and sturdy, they are melting and they're feeling weak. But then that's going to come back up later in these passages that we're looking at tonight. And so the rumor of the power of God is on display. And pick up verse 2. At that time, the Lord said to Joshua, "Make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites again." So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelites at Gibeath Ha'araloth. Now, this is why he did so. All those who came out of Egypt, all the men of military age, died in the wilderness on the way after leaving Egypt. All the people that came out had been circumcised, but all the people born in the wilderness during the journey from Egypt had not. The Israelites had moved about in the wilderness 40 years until all the men who were of military age when they left Egypt had died, since they had not obeyed the Lord, for the Lord had sworn to them that they would not see the land he had solemnly promised their ancestors to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. So he raised up their sons in their place, and these were the ones Joshua circumcised. They were still uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised on the way. And after the whole nation had been circumcised, they remained where they were in camp until they were healed. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you," so that place has been called Gilgal to this day. On the evening of the 14th day of the month, while camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated the Passover. That day, after the Passover, that very day, they ate some of the produce of the land, unleavened bread and roasted grain. The manna stopped the day after they ate the food from the land. There was no longer any manna for the Israelites, but that year they ate the produce of Canaan. All right, so as they are going into the land, the first thing they have to do is prepare themselves to be in right covenant relationship with the Lord. And all the way back in Abraham's day, the Lord initiated circumcision as a covenant sign of a sign of the covenant faithfulness of the people. And for whatever reason, they were not circumcising boys as they were being born while they were in the wilderness. And so now, if they're going to carry on the the work of God, they have to be identified as part of the covenant community and part of the family of Abraham. And circumcision was not unique to the people of Israel, but the tie to the covenant relationship, that was unique. And then also the fact that they did this on the 8th day of a child's life, that was also fairly unique, because most other cultures, when they were, if they had circumcision as a part of their culture, it was usually tied to puberty or a marriage rite. And so this is, there are some distinctives with the people of Israel. So for whatever reason, over 40 years, they were not doing this. And so strategically, the people of Israel, they're about to go to war, right? And so this is actually like a really bad idea strategically, to circumcise all your fighting men. But they are practicing faithfulness and they are trusting the Lord. And so because all the kings are melting in fear because of the people of Israel, they don't come and attack them while the Israelites are recovering after this. Now, there's a couple interesting things about the place names here. And the first one is just in chapter 3. They called this place Gibeath Ha'arelot, which is translated as Hill of Foreskins, which is hilarious. I'm sorry, like that's just what they're going to call it. And so they do this, and the people are healing, and then they rolled away the reproach of Egypt. This was the last sign of their connection to Egypt, and so Gilgal sounds like to roll away, and so like now they are fully identified with the promises of Abraham. They are fully in the land, and so the first thing they do, because this is the springtime, when the Jordan should have been at flood stage, the first thing they do is they celebrate the Passover, which is another part of the covenant faithfulness, because the Passover was the celebration that they were remembering how God had rescued them from slavery in Egypt. And so now the reproach of Egypt has been rolled away. And so they celebrate the Passover for the first time in the promised land. And they use the crops and the different produce of the promised land itself to provide for the feast. And at that moment, at that day, the manna stops. And part of the promise that the Lord had given to the people was that the land would be flowing with milk and honey, that it would be prosperous. And so it's so prosperous that upwards of 2 million people are able to observe the Passover with the produce, the wheat, and all the things that they could just glean from the land. It's a pretty impressive situation here that the people find themselves in, to be able to do all of this. And so the different elements of the Passover also include the slaughtering of a lamb and painting the blood on the door frame of their house. How they did all that while they don't actually have houses, I'm not entirely sure, but this is all part of the tie-in to the people, the covenant faithfulness to the Lord. And so this wilderness wandering is over. It is officially over, and the Lord is no longer going to provide manna for them. And so then it shifts to, they recover, and it starts to shift towards the conquest portion of Joshua. So verse 13. Now, when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us, or for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied, "but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. So they're on the march to Jericho, and this mysterious person is standing there with a sword, a drawn sword, which would be unusual It would be terrifying. And this is one of those instances where we don't know all that is going on here just by reading it. And there's some different theories of what's going on. But Joshua sees somebody who is a military minded person and asks, are you with us or against us? And the man's response is neither. Are you for us or for our enemies? And he says, no, I am the commander of the army of the Lord. And this no, I'm not for you or against you, is a reminder to us that the Lord's way is above our way. He is we should say we are for him, not he is for us. It's kind of the tone that's being communicated here. But he, and then he also says, as the commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. I'm here now. I'm not for you or against you, but I'm here now. And this commander of the army of the Lord, one of the things we talk about when we talk about the Lord is the Lord of hosts. And the host is a military force of angels, essentially. And so the hosts of heaven are the spiritual warfare of that the Lord oversees. And so here, the commander of the army of the Lord is the one who oversees this spiritual warfare, and showing up here before they begin the work of the conquest is a reminder to Joshua that this is the Lord's work. He goes before them, and he is not beholden to the people of Israel, but as they trust him, he will be with them. And Joshua essentially worships this person. He falls down prostrate, which is stretched out on the ground, completely humbled before this person. And then we also hear this is familiar thing. He says, take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy. And if we go back to Exodus chapter 3, this is reminiscent of Moses' encounter with the burning bush, and the Lord speaking from the bush saying, take off your sandals, the place you are standing is holy. And so there's a couple different things that could be happening. This could be an angel that is sent to be with Joshua, or this could also be a theophany, which is an Old Testament appearance of God. And so that is like when Abraham was with the three visitors. Is that a theophany? Or, those kinds of interesting questions. This could also be a Christophany, as a Old Testament appearance of Christ as the commander of the heavenly hosts of the army of the Lord. We don't know for sure who this person is, but clearly what's being communicated is the Lord is now here in some way fighting for the people. And so Joshua obeys and is humbled himself before the commander of the army of heaven. Now, this is one of the times where chapter designations between can really break up the flow of what we need to understand in the narrative. So if you read today and stop at the end of chapter 5 and then pick up chapter 6 tomorrow, as you're doing your devotional reading, you might miss something important, because there's a break here where in 6:1 it says, now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. So it feels like it's a different thing. But then the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and fighting men. So the Lord here is the same commander of the army of heaven. And so now this commander is speaking the words of God to Joshua. And so if it is a Old Testament appearance of the Lord God, Yahweh, he's speaking to Joshua. If it's the angel speaking on his behalf, he's speaking now directly to Joshua. If it's a Christophany, it's an Old Testament appearance of Christ. Whatever it is, this is the same person that was holding a sword out saying, I'm not for you or against you. I am here. And then he says, I have delivered Jericho into your hands. And I love that. I have delivered. It's not, I'm going to do it. It's already done in God's mind. I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all of the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up, everyone straight in. And so the Lord gives Joshua very specific instructions. So it's going to be a 7-day work. And on 6 days, all the fighting men and the priests are going to take a lap around Jericho in silence. And then the 7th day, the priests will blow the trumpets as they're marching around 7 times. And then at the long blast, everybody else will shout. This is an unusual war tactic, but the power of God is going to be on display here, because this is how the Lord's saying, I have delivered Jericho into your hands. And so this overwhelming blast of noise, somehow the Lord is using to break the walls down. And so while Jericho is locked shut, the gates are locked, the people are afraid, their hearts are melting because of all that they have heard that God is doing for the people of Israel. And so they lock the door. There's no way in, but God has a way. And when we look at the interesting thing, when we were looking back in the priests, they were supposed to have these silver trumpets that they would use to communicate communicate movement from the camp, as well as war commands and that kind of stuff. But here they are giving the shofar, which is the ram's horn, and it would be a ram's horn that they would soak so that it could be pliable, like more pliable, and then they could kind of stretch it out to be more straight instead of just the curly ram's horn, so they could make it bigger. But it's a different situation now than just the silver trumpets. It's a shofar in particular. Now, why? We don't know. We're just told, give them the shofar. Don't give them the silver trumpets. And so they are going to do this. So Joshua in the next section is going to walk them through all these instructions. Joshua in verse 6 called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it. And he ordered the army advance, march around the city with the armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord. When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing the trumpets with the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. All this time, the trumpets were sounding, but Joshua had commanded the army, do not give a war cry, do not raise your voices, and do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout, then shout. So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the army returned to camp and spent the night there. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord while the trumpets kept sounding. So the ark, on the 2nd day, they marched around the city once more and returned to camp. They did this for 6 days. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on the day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. But keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise, you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. All the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into his treasury. When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed, so everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men, women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. Joshua said to 2 men who had spied out the land, go into the prostitute's house and bring her out, and all who belong to her, in accordance with your oath to her. So the young men who had done the spying went in and brought out Rahab, her father and mother, her brothers and sister, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her entire family and put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. Then they burned the whole city and everything in it. But they put the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house, because Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute and her family and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. All right, so they do exactly what the Lord had commanded them to do. And Joshua, though, also gives instructions here that everything that is in the city is to be a part of the harem, the ban. It is completely devoted to the Lord. And so everything and everyone in Jericho is to be destroyed, or if it is a fine metal, to be given to the treasury of in the tabernacle, at the treasury of the Lord. Now, this is a miracle of miracles. Like, this is not how anybody who is leading an army would try to take over a fortified city. But the Lord says, this is what you're going to do. And it all comes to pass exactly as he said. The loud sound of the trumpets, the yelling, all of that, the walls come down. Now, sound waves have a substance to them of some sort. They penetrate, they hit things. And so it could be that the Lord knew how the sound waves would work against the walls of Jericho. I don't know. The science behind it baffles my mind, but somehow it happened. And this is the wall came straight down. It wasn't that the walls like tipped over. What he's saying is the walls just crumbled, and every part of the wall except for Rahab's house was destroyed. And so the walls come down, and then Joshua sends the spies to get the Rahab's family. And there's some historicity here as well to say, like, look, Rahab's family was rescued from Jericho. You can go there with the Israelites to this day. So whoever wrote the book of Joshua after Joshua's death, they added this edit in here as well, like to say, like, look, you can just go. You can go ask them about it. It's their family still talking about this. And so there's some historicity here where they're trying to remind the people that these are real events that really happened. And it happened exactly as the Lord said. Now, this emphasis on the ban, on the destruction, on making sure that they completely destroy everything in the city and devote the metals and stuff to the Lord is important, because this is part of, will they trust God? But also it's a kind of first fruits of the conquest. Like, the military in those days, like they funded soldiers' lives through plunder. And so here the Lord is telling them, like, do not take plunder for yourselves. Everything in the city belongs to the Lord. And so they are, it's emphasized for a reason. And Joshua even goes further in verse 26 about how the city of Jericho's not to be rebuilt. At that time, Joshua pronounced the solemn oath: "Cursed before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son, he will lay its foundation. At the cost of his youngest son, he will set up its gates." So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. So this curse here is basically a warning to the people of Israel. Don't try to rebuild the city. It is completely devoted to the Lord. However, when we look to the coming chapters, somebody will try to rebuild Jericho, and this person will lose his firstborn son and his youngest son, because the curse endured. And so as we look at these like pronouncements, I mean, it's intense. When we look at this, it's heartbreaking to see a city destroyed. But one of the things that we need to keep in mind as we are reading through this is the Lord promised this land to Abraham and his descendants. When he told Abraham that his descendants would spend 400 years in Egypt, he told him in that moment that the sins of the Canaanites have not yet reached their completion. And so the Lord knew that there was going to be a time when they would come against the Canaanites. The people of Israel would come against the Canaanites. And so this is happening now. And so this first victory would have been a time of great celebration to see God do this awesome work of destroying the walls of Jericho. And, they are told to not take any plunder for themselves. Excuse me. However, chapter 7 starts with this. But the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Comri, son of Zimri, the son of Zerah of the tribe of Judah, took some of them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel. Now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Beth Aven, to the east of Bethel, and told them, "Go up and spy out the region." So the men went up and spied out Ai. When they returned to Joshua, they said, "Not all the army will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it, and do not weary the whole army, for only a few people live there." So about 3,000 went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai, who killed about 36 of them. They chased the Israelites from the city gate as far as the stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted in fear and became like water. That phrase sound familiar? The Canaanites were the ones who were supposed to be melting with fear, and now the Israelites, they are melting in fear. Now, what happened? There's a couple of things. One, we highlight the disobedience of Achan, and we see that this disobedience has consequences. So that's one part. The second thing that's interesting here is the Lord gave no instructions to Joshua about how to take Ai. Instead, Joshua is working his own plan. It's like, well, we sent spies to go check out Jericho. Let's send spies to go check out Ai. And these spies go and they say, man, this town's small. It's no big deal. We could totally take it. Just send a fraction of the army. We'll be fine. And so Joshua listens and does what they say. There's a level of arrogance that we see here in the people, in Joshua's leadership, where he's like, we got the idea, we got the plan, we got it, we're good. So they send just a fraction of the army, and it does not go well. And they lose 36 of their fighting force. Now, 36 out of 3,000 is not a crazy ratio of loss, right? It seems like that could be expected. But in Jericho, they didn't lose any. And Jericho was a much bigger city. And so Joshua then responds with grief. The heart of the people is melting. Joshua, in verse 6, picks up and talks about his grief. Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down on the ground before the ark of the Lord, remaining there till evening. The elders of Israel did the same and sprinkled dust on their heads. And Joshua said, "Alas, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Pardon your servant, Lord. What can I say now that Israel has been routed by its enemies? The Canaanites and the other people of the country will hear about this, and they will surround us and wipe out your name from the earth. What then will you do for your own great name?" So Joshua is perplexed and mourning, and is like, "God, why did you let us do this? Why did you bring us out here? This loss will completely ruin your reputation among the people." And so he's kind of doing a passive aggressive prayer to the Lord, trying to say, like, well, if you cared about your reputation, God, maybe we should win some battles here. And so the Lord is not having it. And he responds in verse 10. The Lord said to Joshua, stand up. What are you doing down on your face? Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, which I commanded them to keep. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen, they have lied, they have put them with their own possessions. That is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. They turn their backs and run because they have been made liable to destruction. I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction. Go, consecrate the people. Tell them, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There are devoted things among you, Israel. You cannot stand against your enemies until you remove them. In the morning, present yourselves tribe by tribe. The tribe the Lord chooses shall come forward, clan by clan. The clan the Lord chooses shall come forward, family by family. And the family the Lord chooses shall come forward, man by man. Whoever is caught with the devoted things shall be destroyed by fire, along with all that belongs to him. He has violated the covenant of the Lord and has done an outrageous thing in Israel. Early the next morning, Joshua and Israel come forward by tribes, and Judah was chosen. The clan of Judah came forward, and the Zerahites were chosen. He had the clan of the Zerahites come forward by family, and Zimri was chosen. Joshua had his family come forward man by man, and Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zimri, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, was chosen. Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and honor him. Tell me what you have done. Do not hide it from me. Achan replied, it is true. I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I have done. When I saw the plunder a beautiful robe from Babylonia, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent with the silver underneath. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and there it was, hidden in the tent with the silver underneath. They took the things from the tent, brought them to Joshua and all the Israelites, and spread them out before the Lord. Then Joshua, together with all Israel, took Achan, son of Zerah, the silver, the robe, the gold bar, his sons and daughters, his cattle, donkeys, and sheep, his tent, and all that he had to the valley of Achor. Joshua said, why have you brought this trouble on us? The Lord will bring trouble on you today. Then all Israel stoned him, and after they had stoned the rest, they burned them. Over Achan they heaped a large pile of rocks, which remains to this day. Then the Lord turned from his fierce anger. Therefore, that place has been called the Valley of Achor ever since. So Joshua is mourning. God, why did you let this happen? And he says, because your people disobeyed. And so then he begins to seek out the one who disobeyed. Now, the Lord would have known that it was Achan. The Lord would have known exactly what happened, but he walks the people through this process of finding the person who disobeyed, because he wanted them to see that he knows. And so they probably would have chosen by lot, which may have been the Urim and Thummim that the high priest has. Like there's a black stone and a white stone. And so they had they got all the 12 leaders of the 12 tribes, and the priest like pulled out the white stone or the black stone. It's like, not them, not them, not them, not them, not them, Judah. And then on down the line. And this could have taken hours, but the people are there watching all of this happen. And Joshua, as they discover that it's Achan, it's interesting the way he talks to Achan is like, give glory to God. Tell us what happened. It's almost like Joshua is offering Achan an invitation to repent, but Achan does not repent. He just says, yeah, it's true. I have sinned. I did this because I coveted these things that belonged to God. This robe from Babylonia and this bronze and the silver, like I coveted them. So I took them and I hid them. And so all of these decisions that Achan made, then he hid it in his tent. And so Who else would have known that something was hidden in the tent? His family. His family would have known. And so there could have been an opportunity for his family to say, Achan has stolen things from the Lord, and we are not going to support him. But because they didn't bring Achan before the Lord, they also share in his guilt. But his guilt is not just his guilt. It affects the community. And this is one of the important things that we should recognize as we read through the Bible, is there is a corporate effect of sinfulness. Sinful behavior is not just you yourself, but it affects the people around you as well. And this is one of those stories that shows like disobedience in the camp affects the whole camp. And so this is part of why this story is so important. Yeah, they failed, they lost, they were embarrassed in front of Ai because of Achan's sins. And so the Lord is trying to reveal this and make it right. Now, there's a couple things here in the way Achan responds, is that he saw that the robe was beautiful, and that word beautiful is tov, which is good. He saw that it was good. And this is the same word that Eve, when she sees the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, she saw that it was tov to eat. It was good to eat. And so she reached out and she took it. And that's what Achan does as well. He saw that it was good. He saw that it was tov, and he took it for himself. And so when we look at sinfulness, there's sinful behavior, we see something that we think is tov and good, and we deserve it for some reason. So we take it. And so Achan's story is our story. And the major difference for us is not that we are better than Achan, but that the grace of Christ covers over our sin. And this is why we need Jesus, because of what he has done through his death and resurrection. And so we are set free from the power of sin and death. Now, the whole family, as I said, they would have known that Achan had this stuff, the things that were banned, part of the ban, the harem, devoted to the Lord. And so because they did not report Achan, this is a punishment that they all will take. Now, this is important that this is the Lord directing this, because the Lord sets the law. Other places in the law, if somebody kills somebody, the murderer's kids are not guilty of that murder. But because this was a family in cahoots, they're all a part of this. And stoning, as we look through the Bible, is something that is carried out by the community, because the sinfulness of the individual affects the community. And so the community is responsible to help purify the camp now by removing the offender from the community. And so they do exactly this. And as they do that, the Lord's fierce anger is turned away from them. So now they're ready. Like, all right, we lost to Ai. And so chapter 8 picks up giving new instruction. So 8:1 says, "Then the Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid, do not be discouraged. Take the whole army with you and go up and attack Ai. For I have delivered into your hands the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. You shall go do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king, except that you may carry off their plunder and livestock for yourselves. Set an ambush behind the city." So Joshua and the whole army moved out to attack Ai. They chose 30,000 of his best fighting men and sent them out at night with these orders. Listen carefully. You are to set an ambush behind the city. Don't go very far from it. All of you be on the alert. I and all of those with me will advance on the city, and when the men come out against us, as they did before, we will flee from them. They will pursue us, and we will have lured them away from the city. For they will say, they are running away from us as they did before. So when we flee from them, you are to rise up from ambush and take the city. The Lord your God will give it into your hand. When you have taken the city, set it on fire. Do what the Lord has commanded. See to it you have my orders. And so the major difference here that we should note between this attempt to take Ai and the previous one is the Lord is giving instructions now. And instead of the people of Israel acting on their arrogance to say, this city is small, we can take them, the Lord says, send everybody, send them all, and set up an ambush. And so that's what they do. And so there's a confidence that the people of Israel have as they first approach Ai. They get routed and they run away. So now who has the confidence in this situation? The army of Ai. They're like, yeah, these Israelites, they're nothing. I don't know what Jericho's problem was. We can take these guys. And so they play into that arrogance. And so Joshua is leading the bait army here to say attack, and then they come out and then say retreat, run away. And so they run away, and then the ambush is going to come and take the city. And so that is the setup for what's about to happen. And so everybody is on board. They go at night, which warfare at night was a very risky thing to do because you can't see your army. There's a lot of confusion. And that's one of the reasons why the ambush could work. And so it takes time to get everybody in place. And so at night, they go to attack the city. Verse 9, then Joshua sent them off, and they went out to place of ambush and lay in wait between Bethel and Ai, to the west of Ai. But Joshua spent the night with the people. Early the next morning, Joshua mustered his army, and he and the leaders of Israel marched out before them to Ai. The entire force that was with him marched up and approached the city and arrived in front of it. They set up camp north of Ai with the valley between them and the city. Joshua had taken about 5,000 men and set them in ambush between Bethel and Ai to the west of the city. So the soldiers took up their positions with the main camp to the north of the city and the ambush to the west of it. That night, Joshua went in to the valley. When the king of Ai saw this, he and all his men in the city hurried out early in the morning to meet Israel in battle at a certain place overlooking the Arabah. But he did not know that an ambush had been set against him behind the city. Joshua and all Israel let themselves be driven back before them, and they fled toward the wilderness. All the men of Ai were called to pursue them, and they pursued Joshua and were lured away from the city. Not a man remained in Ai or Bethel who did not go after Israel. They left the city open and went in pursuit of Israel. So the trap is working. It took a while to set everything up, but the king sees the smaller force and is like, we can totally take these jokers. They're not very good fighters. So they do this. But then in verse 18, the Lord said to Joshua, hold out toward Ai the javelin that is in your hand, for into your hand I will deliver the city. So that should sound familiar to us, because when the Lord instructed Moses to part the sea, hold out the staff. When they were fighting the Amalekites, Moses held up his staff. And so instead of the staff, which is a symbol for the shepherd that Moses was, Joshua, the military man, the Lord says, hold out your javelin, it's either a spear or it could also be a sword with like a curve to it. Like there's some confusion on exactly what kind of weapon this is, but hold it out. I've given you the city. So Joshua held up towards the city the javelin that was in his hand. As soon as he did this, the men in the ambush rose quickly from their position and rushed forward. They entered the city and captured it and quickly set it on fire. The men of Ai looked back and saw the smoke of the city rising up in the sky, but they had no chance of escape in any direction. The Israelites, who had been fleeing toward the wilderness, had turned back against their pursuers. But when Joshua and all Israel saw the ambush had taken the city and the smoke was going up from it, they turned around and attacked the men of Ai. Those in the ambush also came out of the city against them, so they were caught in the middle with Israelites on both sides. Israel cut them down, leaving them neither survivors nor fugitives, but they took the king of Ai alive and brought him to Joshua. When Israel had finished killing all the men of Ai in the fields and in the wilderness where they had chased them. And when every one of them had been put to the sword, all the Israelites returned to Ai and killed those who were in it. 12,000 men and women fell that day, all the people of Ai. For Joshua did not draw back the hand that held out his javelin until he had destroyed all who lived in Ai. But Israel did carry off for themselves the livestock, the plunder of this city, as the Lord had instructed Joshua. So Joshua burned Ai and made it a permanent heap of ruins, a desolate place to this day. He impaled the body of the king of Ai on a pole and left it there till evening. At sunset, Joshua ordered them to take the body from the pole and throw it down to the entrance of the city gate. And they raised a large pile of rocks over it, which remains to this day. And so Joshua sets the ambush works. They rout the people of the army of Ai because of their own confidence. And so they're coming, the people of Ai, the army of Ai are trapped between the large army that was going to the city and the smaller army that was the bait army that led them out of the city. And so they're trapped. And so the army of Israel just collapses down onto the army of Ai and Bethel. And then they turn their attention to the city. And, the tragedy is we see that 12,000 people died from this battle. And it's heartbreaking when we read those kinds of numbers. That's a lot of death. But this is also part of the sins of the Canaanites that the Lord had allowed for so long. The justice for those sins is coming due. And so this is part of what is going on here as well. Unlike Jericho, though, the people can take the plunder from the city. And so that they do. And then when they are all done, they burn the whole city down. And they execute the king. And impaling a king, it was a symbol to others who may have, from other communities who may see this. And in other cultures, they would leave the king on a pole for days. But the people of Israel were commanded to not do that, to not leave anybody impaled on a pole or hanging from a tree overnight. And so at evening, they take him down and they bury the king and the whole city under a pile of rocks. And again, there's more historicity. That pile of rocks is there till this day. That's what the person who compiled Joshua says. Now, Ai and Jericho are two cities that we may have an idea of where they are. And Jericho, it was rebuilt, and so we have a stronger feeling about where Jericho is. And there are interesting things when we look at the archaeological record around Jericho that says, there was some kind of major event happened here, major destruction happened. And so the way the Bible talks about Jericho and the way archaeologists talk about Jericho may seem a little different, but it is an important city. And so there are an important part of the biblical narrative. So people are looking because for followers of Jesus, for people, Old Testament believers, or Jewish people, this is an important part of their history. And so, but for non-believing archaeologists, there are those who are looking in the land of Israel, for ways to disprove the events of Scripture. And so a lot of people have a lot of theories about archaeology of biblical lands. And I have a book about it. One of my profs, actually, the guy who taught this class, archaeology of biblical lands, Dwayne Brady, he passed away just recently. But one of the books that we read was called The Stones Cry Out, What Archaeology Reveals About the Truth of the Bible, by Randall Price. And it is a very, very interesting book to just look at how there are things that we see in Scripture and we see evidence of those things in the world. And so, it's unusual stories, but in events, but there are some evidences that say, this could have actually happened. So, so they win. They went from clear victory of the Lord, disobedience, defeat, making things right, back to victory. And so they win at Ai. And then one more section here in chapter chapter 8, verse 30. Then Joshua built on Mount Ebal an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the Israelites. He built it according to what is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of uncut stones, on which no iron tool had been used. On it they offered to the Lord burnt offerings and sacrificed fellowship offerings. There, in the presence of the Israelites, Joshua wrote on the stones a copy of the law of Moses. All the Israelites, with their elders, officials, and judges, were standing on both sides of the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, facing the Levitical priests who carried it. Both the foreigners living among them and the native born were there. Half of the people stood in front of Mount Gerizim, and half of them in front of Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had formerly commanded, when he gave instructions to bless the people of Israel. Afterward, Joshua read all the words of the law, the blessings and the curses, just as it is written in the book of the law. There was not a word of all that Moses had commanded that Joshua did not read to the whole assembly of Israel, including the women and children and the foreigners who lived among them. So this is a covenant renewal. And this is this moment here, they have had 2 victories. They will do much more fighting, and the battle is the war is far from over. But here, as they are continuing to see the Lord's faithfulness, and after the rebellion of Achan and the discipline that came, they are renewing their commitment to the Lord at this point. Now, this place between Gerizim and Ebal is important because that's where Moses told them to do this, and so here they are in this region, so they're doing it. This will come up again. They will do this, like this will happen again in Joshua's lifetime, where you get the people together to say, let's choose this day whom you will serve. And so this is the first of the covenant renewal, and a covenant renewal was something that in the culture at large was not uncommon, where the king, the ruling king, would do these kinds of renewal commitment ceremonies with the people that he ruled over. And so the Lord is the king. So Joshua is his representative as the leader of the people of Israel. And so he leads them in this. And so the reading of the law of Moses is the reading of the covenant that God had established with the people. And so whether or not it was like all of Deuteronomy, or if it was all of Exodus, or from Exodus 20, Leviticus, the laws and numbers, and Deuteronomy, we don't know how much of the law it was, but it was a significant amount of the law. I would lean towards something more like Deuteronomy, because this is the generation of the people. They would just have seen Moses reading or giving his last word, the second giving of the law before dying. And so I would lean more towards the Lord having Joshua read Deuteronomy to the people. But they did, and they listened. And so this is it's important for them to do this as they are continuing in their faithfulness and their journey of trusting the Lord as he's giving them the land. So that is Deuteronomy, or Joshua chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8. Are there any questions on these chapters and the things that we discussed? Any questions? It was a lot, so.
Oops, wrong button. Wrong button.
Okay, I can hear you.
What?
Somebody said wrong button, but I can hear.
Hit the wrong button. Sorry, I was trying to get my unmuted button and I turned the video off.
Oh.
One thing that when the angel that talks to Joshua, he's the commander of the army. I'm wondering if it was the Archangel Michael.
Well, maybe we don't get the name of the angel, so we can't definitively say that. So, but whoever it is, they have great authority and they speak for God. So
Mhm.
it is a powerful, powerful entity. So
Yeah. So I got one question. Jericho, they were not Canaanites, correct?
everybody who lived in the land,
Hmm.
it was considered a Canaanite because it is the land of Canaan.
Okay.
So Canaan was not necessarily a city state or a nation. It was a
Mhm.
region. And
Oh,
so they're all Canaanites. But among the Canaanites, there would have been uh, Jerichoites, Aiites, and all the different groups there because it was they didn't have like a confederacy of a strong nation.
mhm.
They were all individual city states with outlying regions that would have worked towards like fed into Jericho or fed into Gibeah or all these different places. And so so they are all technically Canaanites.
It was a Canaanite region, but they had their own kings
Yes. Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
So
So
a king
Jericho
wouldn't
has a
really be
king.
a king. So a
What's
king
that?
really wouldn't be a king. It would be like more like a governor or something.
Yeah. I mean, they would be called the kings because they ruled the city. So our idea of kingship over large areas of land is different than their idea of kingship. So the most powerful person in the world at this time would have been in Egypt, the Pharaoh. Um,
Hmm.
but even in Egypt, Pharaoh's influence was mainly just around wherever the capital city was at the time. And like they had a confederacy with the other people, but like the power was in one place. And so like we look at the map of Egypt today and we think Pharaoh ruled all of this,
Yeah.
right? But probably not
No.
because there wasn't an actual way to control that many people over that big of a land. And so it was even Pharaoh was going to be a less powerful force than what we think of as kings in our brain right now.
Yeah.
But he was still really powerful. So it's not until like the Pharaoh empire, the Egyptian empire will grow bigger and bigger in the future from this point in Joshua, just as the Babylonian empire starts to grow. But that growth is going to tie in with communication abilities and military strength and technology development, all these things that'll grow over time. But here in Canaan, there was no like capital city of Canaan. It was all their own area. And so they had their so there were many kings in all these cities, but they were not always affiliated. They will unify against Israel. And I think next week we'll read about the five kings. 5 kings, 10 kings. There's a group of kings that will come against Israel and they'll try, but they'll lose. Spoiler. So
I guess we just have to minimize. I'm thinking, oh, king, that must be a big area. So their sphere of influence and power was far minimal compared to what I'm thinking.
yeah, so it's not like the king of England
Yeah.
overseeing all of England. No, this is a king over this city. So like a very powerful mayor. So
Yeah. Why not?
So it's kind of like Kings of England before Arthur like united them into one big kingdom.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So one of the challenges we have in when we look at ancient history is, and especially in this time, is the idea of the nations. Because when we think of nations, we think of constitutions, we think of America is a big nation, Canada is a big nation. There's a lot of land, a lot of power in a centralized place. But the nations in the ancient world were not there yet. They're not as big and powerful as our nations are. So we have to kind of unpack that baggage a little bit. So
I
yeah,
guess
thank you for asking that, because that is helpful to like see like how could they come against so many people? Well, they weren't all on the same page. So yeah.
had they started like expanding in commerce, so that's probably why they were so minimal. They didn't have a very big commerce system. I
Well,
mean,
they
this
would
kind of
have.
getting on topic, but
Yeah, there would have been trade. of some sort. Because, different areas would have different resources. And so there would have been some kind of trade happening. But there wasn't a unified currency.
No.
Everything was how much does that gold weigh? That's how much it's worth, and so it was just like chunks of metal that they would weigh out. And so, so there was commerce and there was trade between cities, but traveling was also not a super safe thing to do, because you could find nomads who were just out to hurt people. So they would travel in big caravans because there was safety in numbers, but even then it was not necessarily a sure thing that you would get to where you're trying to go.
Yeah, especially if you're carrying gold. Somebody would be like, hey,
Yeah.
coming after you.
Yeah. So gold and silver, highly valuable things. But I'm not a, expert on ancient world economics, so I can't go too deep into those kinds of things. But yeah, they had systems, but they were just not a unified region, perfectly unified. So, yeah. Any other questions?
This is just one of my favorite stories, the Battle of Jericho in Sunday school. But I never really thought of as a kid, like, what was actually happening to the people inside. I just thought it was neat that we got to like pretend with trumpets and sing the song, and just really hit hard that like they was destroying something so large and affecting so many people. That's crazy.
Yeah, there is a lot of sanitizing of Bible stories that we do when we teach these stories to children.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to traumatize them, which is good. But and this is one of the challenges we have is when people start to really think about what happened in these events. Like people take this and they're like, then how could a good God do this?
Yeah.
And that's an important question. And we shouldn't just say, well, the Bible says it, get over it. Yeah. Right? Because that'll just push people away. But to wrestle with it is important for us even now, to say, yeah, you know what? This is a hard passage. And reading the stories and I don't want to be one who glorifies violence, because violence has a cost, and so it's not about glorifying the violence, but coming back to like the motive behind these things for the Lord is there is a great wickedness in the region, in the land of Canaan, that these people have polluted God's land with their pagan practices and their witchcraft and their human sacrifice, all these different things that were going on. And so for the Lord, this was unacceptable that this would be happening in the land that he had promised to Abraham and his descendants. And so this is that truth has to be communicated when we talk about the conquest of the promised land. Now, this is a description of what happened and a prescription for these ancient Israelites. This is not a prescription for people today to go and conquer land that we think we want, right? Like that's not, that it doesn't just translate over to our time. And so I get nervous when I see people in our own country now using Jericho, with like Christian nationalism language, like we're going to do a Jericho march. And like that was something that was happening in, 2020. That was terrifying to me because it's like, you guys know what happened at Jericho? Like a lot of people died. And I know that there are people who are like, yes, we know. And we're for it. And it just breaks my heart.
That's not a good sign.
No. Yeah. No. And like,
God was not in it.
Yeah. This is not something that God's like, let's keep going. Let's keep doing this. No. So when those kinds of things happen in our culture, it makes me very, it makes me afraid for the church, because it's like, wow, we really just have missed the point on a lot of what's going on in the Old Testament. And we think we can just take it and import it into America, and we can't. It's not the same. So, but if we're going to say, like, we're going to march around this region and pray that the Lord would knock down spiritual warfare or spiritual walls, like, yeah, that's great. Do it. That's awesome. Leave your weapons at home, because we battle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. And so we don't need any worldly weapons to do that kind of prayer marching. But it's when people start arming themselves now, it's like, I'm not going to that. So
You lost me there for a minute, because I didn't know you were talking about weapons. When you said you were marching, a Jericho march, I'm like, well, they're going around there to bring down strongholds. I don't see anything wrong with that. But
Yeah.
with guns, yeah, not a good deal.
Yeah. So there's a difference between an actual prayer march and then like we're going to threaten you march, which I'm not for that at all. That's not what we should be doing. So
No, but like a prayer march where we would be out there praying and praying against the evil things that are going on, that would be okay.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So
I'm sure we're on the same page.
yeah. All right. Any other questions?
Not really a question. Well, I'll let anybody else ask a question first. Anybody else? No? Okay. The whole frequency thing is a cool thing. The fact that they blew the trumpet and it came down. Because I've seen a lot of things in choir when I was in high school. There are certain pitches in the soprano section that you can actually shatter glass when you hit that pitch, like opera singers.
Yeah.
You hold a
Yeah.
note long enough on the soprano pitch that will shatter glass. So
Yeah.
cool that a frequency could do that, to bring something down to the ground.
Yeah. So it's amazing, like what frequency and sound waves can actually do. So if there are people who try to like math out this problem, like what would have to happen to knock down a wall, and one of like the math, like if somebody stood in front of that sound barrage, like their heads would explode. Like that's how loud it would have to be. So somehow, like the Lord used all this to do this work, to make the walls fall right down. There's another interesting thing that, like, when you march in cadence, like with an army, you create vibrations in the ground as well. And so, like, the marching around the city was creating like vibrations in the ground. For 7 days they marched, and on the seventh day they did 7 times, so that's a whole bunch of vibrations. And then the loud blaring noise of the trumpet and the shouts, somehow all of that together and the power of God brought these walls down. Amazing. Yeah, but how it all works is sometimes people get hung up on the like, let's find the frequency, but it's like, that's not why God told us this story. Like, that's not why it's in here, is for us to find the frequency, but to say, look at what God can do. Right. So
it's amazing that he told them that, because he knew God knows everything. He would know what would terrorize the people within those walls. It's been known that when you hear the marching, a multitude of marching is kind of a terror tactic for other people, because they think that there's more people out there than there actually are.
Yeah.
Because it magnifies the sound of it. So it made them probably sound like they were a bigger army than they actually were. Good terror tactic.
Yeah. I mean, it's intense. And there's probably people watching from the walls going like, when are they going to attack?
Yeah.
When are they going to do anything? And they don't do anything for 6 days. They just walk around and then go home. They're not building a siege. They're just like, they're doing a parade around the city and then leaving.
Yeah.
And the parade is quiet on those 6 days. Like that is weird, and probably would have freaked a lot of people out. And the gates are locked shut, and so it's like they can't leave. Like they can't escape. Like we don't know what to do here. Yeah.
And
So
pretty
that's
cool. They just kept the suspense going. Yeah, let's keep it going. Are they going to attack? What are they doing? Just keep that suspense going for a long while until it's like, oh, what are they really doing?
yeah. These Israelites are weird. So
Has this
yeah.
ever been made into a movie? This section, I don't watch enough movies of this sort. I was just curious because it's so exciting. Like it would make, if someone could do it properly, it'd make a very exciting film. Kind of weird.
Let's see. I'm gonna pull up the old internet movie database.
I can't with my phone.
Well, I'm laughing because imagine, okay, Jason Statham, those kind of guys always do the, the man movies where it come bombing on in to take everybody down. Imagine Jason Statham being in something like that where he has to just blow the trumpet or sing,
Yep.
that would be a little bit oddity for that guy.
It would.
I do not see any movies about Joshua in particular.
Right. We need to get on that.
Well, I'm not gonna. I don't have time for that. So, yeah. Oh wait, no. I typed in movies about Jason. those exist.
There is one, but it's scary.
Jason and the Argonauts, maybe.
Well, there's a movie called Joshua, but it is about a kid named Joshua.
Okay.
And then there's another one about Joshua. It's about a modern retelling of Jesus,
Well,
because Joshua and Jesus are the same name.
Yeshua.
Yeshua, yes. Yeah.
Jericho.
I'll look up movie about Jericho. Yeah, good call. Jericho, a 2000 American Western film. So no.
Yeah, that's
Fall
a
of
lot.
Jericho, 2009 movie. That's a documentary. No.
I think it's been used symbolically, like as a name, but it's about something else.
Yeah. There's plenty of cartoons. Yeah, I've seen this one actually that showed up. I watched that and it was not good. So there's a lot of things that we watched in church when I was a kid to try to keep us busy while Sunday night service was happening. So yeah.
Busy and quiet.
Yep. All right. Well, any other thoughts or questions?
Can you refresh my mind? The mountains that had the curses and the blessings was Mount Ebal was the cursing, wasn't it?
Yeah, that'll come back later. So they didn't do that this time.
Okay, this
So-
isn't where they choose the blessings or the cursing, huh? Because I know
No.
it was talked about in Deuteronomy.
Yeah, they do talk about it in Deuteronomy, but they don't do it here. So it'll be later in Joshua.
I'm
So
getting
they'll
ahead
do
of
that again. Yeah. But yeah, it's going to be, I mean, we're going to get all the exciting stuff pretty quickly in Joshua. So just enjoy it while we can. And then it's going to be, these people got this land and these people got this land. It'll be fun. It'll be a hoot. So, all right. Any other thoughts?
I was just last thought for me was just the part about sin really hit me. I think for a long time I tried to kid myself that even just in my own personal life that the things I was doing were only hurting myself, and this just kind of made me realize how far spread just my own little decisions were in my own
Mhm.
life, through my children and my parents and my coworkers, and like everybody in my community, and that I was just lying to myself for sure about
Yeah.
it just me. So it was just a good reminder.
Yeah. One of the major disconnects that we have in our culture to the ancient world is we have a hyper individualized mindset.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think and it's not just you, Lizzie. Like almost all of us think, well, it's just between me and Jesus.
Yeah.
But sin breaks everything. And when we recognize that is the cost, like the sin breaks things, like it breaks our community. And and so recognizing that there's a corporate responsibility for the righteousness of one another, like that, not like we're morality police, but that like we should be watching out for folks to say like that road is dangerous.
Yeah.
That road is a bad road, and I don't want you to go down that because I want what's best for you. Not like if you do that, I'm going to tell Jesus on you. Like that's not our goal,
No.
but to watch out for one another, to support one another, and to to walk in righteousness together. And that's one of the things like why recovery programs have success is because you realize like I'm not alone. Like the successful recovery journeys are like recognizing like there are people who struggle with these things, and they are on a path of healing. I can walk this road too. And that is one of the things that the church should be good at is to say we're all a mess, but Jesus is helping us clean up our mess.
Amen.
And we and so we can rejoice that we can find freedom in him. But when we try to hide it, put it under the tent, and think nobody knows, God knows.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. One of the
Yeah.
most dangerous phrases that I have ever told myself is nobody has to know. Because that's almost guaranteed that everyone will find out and the consequences will be terrible. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's an important lesson for the people of Israel to learn here with Achan. But it's like, didn't you guys see all these people rebelling in the wilderness? Didn't that teach you anything? And apparently not, because the human heart is really good at seeing something that we think is tov and making it bad when we take it. Like the difference between tov and so good and bad or good and evil is tov and ra. And so we see what is tov and we make it ra. And so like that's our heart transforms it that way. So
And
Yeah.
what is raw?
ra is bad or evil in the Old Testament in Hebrew. So tov is good, righteous, pleasing, beautiful, tov. So
Thinking back to
sin makes
Yeah.
tov things raw. So all right. Well,
That's-
y'all,
okay.
what'd you say?
I said that's one for the phrase book.
Yeah. Well,
Can we
have fun
start
with that.
using that as a catchphrase now? Tove. When we walk into church, Tove.
No.
Tov. I actually have a book called A Church Called Tov. It's really good. So
Nice.
anyway, I thought it was right here on my shelf. It's somewhere else on my shelf. So I was, yeah.
To the Joshua and Achan too. When Joshua tore his clothes, I think that was kind of a knockdown from him. Maybe he thought he was, he was trying to do this in his own strength, maybe a little bit. And God's like, yeah, I'm going to teach you a little lesson here.
Well, tearing your clothes in the ancient world is a sign of mourning.
I know.
So it's not necessarily the Lord knocking Joshua down as much as Joshua like saying, I'm so upset. So
Yeah.
That if I tried.
me neither. But our clothes are like shirts have hems on the top,
Yeah.
and so they didn't have that technology back then. So so it was a little easier, but it was a lot more costly for them to do that though.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right, y'all. Well, we should wrap up and we'll be back next week. So I hope to see you guys Sunday. And yeah, have a great week, everyone.
You too. Bye, guys.
All right. Bye.